Rodrigo Mendez adjusted his $200 Rolex and watched the man across the table tremble. 63 years old, hands calloused from a lifetime of working the land, eyes red from weeks without sleep. "Mr. Rodrigo, please," the man's voice cracked. "I've been on this land for 40 years. My family was born there. My grandchildren play in the yard. I just need 6 more months to pay off the debt." Rodrigo didn't even look up from his papers. His Mont Blanc pen, more expensive than the farmer's truck, scratched numbers onto a spreadsheet. A net worth of 800 million isn't built on sentimentality. 40 years? Rodrigo finally looked up, his eyes as cold as metal. "And in 40 years you couldn't manage your property properly. That's not my problem." "Sir, the drought killed the cattle. The rains destroyed the crops. It was an unusual year, you know that. Everyone in the region struggled." "Everyone?" Rodrigo leaned back in his leather chair. "Because I bought 7 farms in the region in the last 2 years. All of them went broke due to the weather. Interesting how I prosper in the same climate that destroys others." The man swallowed hard. He knew exactly how Rodrigo prospered. By damming water that should have gone to neighboring properties, using pesticides that contaminated aquifers, bribing inspectors to look the other way. "My granddaughter is 8 years old," the farmer tried one last time. "She doesn't understand why she has to leave the only home she's ever known." Rodrigo closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. "Teach her about the real world. Not everyone is born to be an owner. Some are born to be employees. Consider this a valuable lesson." "Do you have children, Mr. Rodrigo?" For a split second, something flickered across Rodrigo's face. A shadow, a flicker of discomfort. But it was gone as quickly as a blink. "I have a company to run. You have 72 hours to vacate. After that, the state police will conduct the eviction." The man stood up, staggering. "You'll have to sleep with that on your conscience." "Conscience doesn't pay dividends," Rodrigo replied, already typing on his phone. "And I sleep very well in my 50 bed." When the farmer left, Rodrigo called his enforcer. "Jonas, the St. John's farm. I want the family out by Thursday. If they resist, you know what to do." Rodrigo hung up and walked to the panoramic window of his 30-story office. Chicago stretched out below like a chessboard, each piece representing an opportunity for profit. He had clawed his way up from nothing, a poor kid from the countryside who understood early on that compassion was a luxury for those who could afford to be weak. His mahogany desk held no photos. His planner had no personal appointments. His phone didn't receive calls from family because there was no family to call, exactly as he wanted. The triplex apartment in Lincoln Park was a museum of wealth, paintings by dead artists, wines that cost more than cars, imported furniture that no one but the cleaner ever saw. Rodrigo had lived alone for 20 years ever since. Well, ever since he decided that relationships were high-risk, low-return investments. That night, as he cut into a $300 steak he couldn't taste, Rodrigo reviewed the papers for Hope Ranch. His next acquisition, an 800-acre property on the banks of the Mississippi River, mortgaged by an indebted family. The process was clean, the bribes paid, the documentation perfectly forged. In 48 hours, it would be another property in his portfolio. Rodrigo put an aerial photograph of the ranch into his briefcase. For a second, he looked at the image with more attention than usual. Something about that land felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. It must just be the feeling of victory, he thought, another conquest. One step closer to his first billion. The next morning, at 6 a.m., Rodrigo was already on the road to downstate Illinois. Hope Ranch awaited him, as did an encounter that would change everything he believed about who he truly was. The armored Humvee kicked up dust on the dirt road. Rodrigo drove with urgency. He wanted to finalize the property transfer and get back to Chicago before nightfall. Hope Ranch was 15 miles from the nearest town, isolated between rolling hills and the Mississippi River. Perfect for his plans, the GPS had stopped working 3 miles back. Rodrigo cursed under his breath. Cutting-edge technology was useless in the middle of nowhere. When the wooden bridge appeared before him, he sighed in relief. It was the last barrier before the ranch. But something was wrong. In the middle of the bridge, a strange movement in the water caught his eye. Rodrigo slammed on the brakes, the Humvee's ABS fighting the loose dirt. He got out of the car, annoyed, his Armani suit already sticking to him in the humid 98-degree heat. It was a horse, black as coal, struggling against the strong current of the swollen river. The animal was clearly panicking, its front hooves out of the water, trying to find something to grip, but being dragged by the force of the muddy waters. "Damn it," Rodrigo muttered. "Just what I needed." He glanced at his watch. 2:30 p.m. If he lost any more time here, he wouldn't reach the ranch until after 4 p.m., and he still needed to get back before dark. Those roads were dangerous at night. He got back into the car and started the engine. The horse's owner's problem, not his. Social Darwinism, the weakest get left behind. That's how the world worked. But as he went to maneuver around the situation, the horse whinnied. Not just any whinny. A desperate, almost human sound that echoed through the empty hills and pierced something Rodrigo didn't know he still possessed within him. His hands froze on the steering wheel. The animal looked directly at him, and that's when Rodrigo saw the mark. On the horse's neck, a clear horseshoe-shaped scar gleamed against its wet coat. Rodrigo blinked several times, sure he was seeing things. But the mark was there, unmistakable. That scar. He knew that mark. "It can't be," he murmured, getting out of the car again. The horse was sinking. Maybe 2 more minutes and it would be swallowed by the water. Rodrigo stood frozen on the bridge, torn between the urgency of reaching the ranch and a visceral feeling he couldn't explain. Why did that scar bother him so much? The animal whinnied again, weaker this time. It was giving up. Shit, shit, shit. Rodrigo took off his jacket and tie, tossing them onto the car seat, not out of kindness, not out of compassion, but because he couldn't take his eyes off that scar and needed to understand why. He scrambled down the uneven bank, his $3 Italian shoes getting ruined in the mud. The water was cold and stronger than it looked. In seconds, the current almost took him too. "Easy, easy," he yelled at the horse, which was thrashing in panic. "Stop moving, you idiot!" Rodrigo managed to grab the animal's mane, but its weight almost pulled him under. The horse was immense, easily 100 pounds of pure muscle in desperation. For 15 hellish minutes, Rodrigo fought the water and the animal. His hands were cut on the rocks at the bottom. His $8,000 suit turned into wet rags, and he swallowed more muddy water than he cared to admit. Twice he almost gave up. Twice the horse's whinny made him continue. Finally, he managed to guide the animal to a shallower part where it could touch the bottom with its hooves. The horse emerged from the water trembling but alive. Rodrigo dragged himself to the bank, spitting water and mud, completely soaked and filthy. He looked at the horse, which watched him from a few yards away, breathing heavily, but safe. "You're welcome," Rodrigo said sarcastically. The horse slowly approached and, to Rodrigo's surprise, nudged his shoulder with its muzzle. A gentle touch, almost grateful. It was then that Rodrigo saw the scar up close. It wasn't accidental. It was a handmade mark, precise. A horseshoe branded into the skin like a tattoo, and he was absolutely certain he had seen that mark before. But where? When? The horse moved away and trotted towards the woods, stopping once to look back before disappearing among the trees. Rodrigo stood there, dripping dirty water, staring at the spot where the animal had vanished. His phone was soaked, his suit ruined, And he was late for the most important meeting of the week, but for some reason he couldn't explain. He couldn't stop thinking about that scar. Rodrigo arrived at Hope Ranch looking like a beggar. Dry mud caked in his hair, torn suit, destroyed shoes. The lawyer waiting for him, a nervous man named Dr. Cardoso, barely recognized him. "Mr. Rodrigo? What happened?" "Car trouble," Rodrigo lied. "Let's get this done. I have to be back in Chicago today." But as they walked around the property for the mandatory inspection, Rodrigo felt increasingly uncomfortable. Not because of the smell of the barn on his expensive clothes, but because of something in the atmosphere of the place. Every corner of the ranch evoked a strange sensation, as if he had been there before. "The Oliveira family lived here for 3 generations," Dr. Cardoso explained, flipping through papers. "The patriarch died 2 years ago and left many debts. The widow tried to keep the property, but—" "I'm not interested in the story," Rodrigo cut him off. "I want to see the stables and the house." The main stable was an old but solid building, hardwood darkened by time, large, well-ventilated stalls, clearly built by someone who understood horses. Rodrigo ran his hand over the worn gates, and again that strange sensation. "They bred horses?" he asked, trying to sound disinterested. "Yes, sir. Purebred Lusitanos. They say the late Mr. Manuel had a special talent with animals. He trained horses for other farms in the region." Manuel. The name stirred something in Rodrigo's memory, like a stone thrown into still water. This Manuel... What was his full name? Dr. Cardoso consulted the papers. "Manuel Ferreira de Oliveira, born in 1945, died in 2023. "Why do you ask?" Rodrigo didn't answer. The name meant nothing to him, but there was something else. In the back of one of the stalls, hanging on the wall, he saw an old horseshoe. Not just any horseshoe. This one had an engraved design, a specific mark. The same mark he saw on the horse's neck. "This horseshoe," Rodrigo pointed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is it decoration?" "I'm not sure. The widow said it was a family mark, something Manuel used to identify his horses, an old tradition." Rodrigo approached the horseshoe. Next to it, a dusty frame held an old photograph, a middle-aged man smiling next to a black horse. The man had the same light eyes as... "May I see that photo?" Dr. Cardoso took it off the wall and wiped the glass with his sleeve. This was Manuel with his favorite horse. Tempestad, its name was. They say they were never separated. Rodrigo held the photo with trembling hands. The horse in the image was identical to the one he had saved from the river, and those eyes of the man. He knew them. He was sure of it. "Doctor, I need to know where the widow is now. It's urgent." "She went to live with her daughter in the capital. But why all the curiosity? I thought you just wanted the property papers." Rodrigo wasn't listening. His eyes scanned the details of the photo, searching for clues. In the bottom corner, a handwritten date. Manuel and Tempestad, 1990. 1990. Rodrigo was 17 in 1990. And where was he? Where was he in 1990? Suddenly, fragments began to connect. The sense of familiarity with the ranch. The name Manuel echoing somewhere in his memory, that horseshoe-shaped scar. "Dr. Cardoso, change my plans. I'm staying in town tonight. I want all the records for this property for the last 40 years. And I want the widow's address. But sir, the transfer papers, they can wait." Rodrigo put the photo in the inner pocket of his wet jacket. "I have something to investigate first." That night, in the town's only hotel, Rodrigo stayed up until dawn, studying old property documents, birth certificates, animal records, family photos, searching for anything that explained why this place affected him so deeply. And then he found something that made his world stop. A birth certificate from 1975. Child's name, Rodrigo Mendes de Oliveira. Father's name, Manuel Ferreira de Oliveira. Address, Hope Ranch, Mississippi River. Rodrigo wasn't just the new owner of that property. He was the son of the man he had stolen it from. Rodrigo couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the cheap hotel bed, the birth certificate trembling in his hands. Rodrigo Mendes de Oliveira, son of Manuel Ferreira de Oliveira. Impossible. His adoptive parents had always said he was an orphan, found in a shelter in New Orleans when he was 3. There was never any mention of a ranch, a biological father, horses. At 6 in the morning, Rodrigo was back at the ranch, this time not as a buyer, but as... what? A son? An heir? A thief of his own inheritance? Dr. Cardoso arrived an hour later, surprised to find him there. Mr. Rodrigo, I thought you were coming back this afternoon to sign the papers. Change of plans. Rodrigo showed him the certificate. You need to explain to me how I'm buying the ranch from my own father. Dr. Cardoso turned ashen. He read and reread the document several times. But this is impossible. The widow never mentioned. Wait. He fumbled for his phone with trembling fingers. Mrs. Oliveira, it's Dr. Cardoso. I need to ask an urgent question. Did Manuel have any children? Biological children? Rodrigo could hear the woman's tearful voice on the other end of the line. Yes, he did. A boy. Rodrigo. But he disappeared when he was little. His first wife took him when they separated. Manuel spent his life looking for him. Dr. Cardoso hung up in shock. Mr. Rodrigo, I didn't know. If I had known you were the son of the man you're robbing. Rodrigo finished bitterly. The revelation should have changed everything. It should have made Rodrigo cancel the purchase, return the property, seek out the widow to clear up the misunderstanding. But it changed nothing. Rodrigo still needed those lands for his expansion project. He still had signed contracts, investors waiting. The difference was, it hurt now. Back in his Chicago office, Rodrigo tried to work normally. But every time he looked at the Hope Ranch papers, he saw the photo of the man with the black horse, his father, and the horse he saved from the river. On impulse, he did something he hadn't done in years. He canceled an important meeting. Jonas, I want you to investigate something for me. Manuel Ferreira de Oliveira, deceased in 2023. I want to know everything. Where he lived, how he died, what he did. Everything. Any problem with the ranch's documentation, boss? Just do as I'm told. That afternoon, Rodrigo made an unprecedented decision. He gave his secretary the day off and stayed alone in the office. For the first time in 20 years, he couldn't concentrate on numbers and profits. Instead, he researched online. Manuel Ferreira de Oliveira, Hope Ranch, Lusitano horses. He found a few mentions in local newspapers. Award-winning breeder, expert with problem horses, man known for his patience and kindness to animals. Everything Rodrigo was not. At 6 p.m., Jonas called. Boss, I got the information. This Manuel, I don't know how to say this, but he spent 30 years looking for someone named Rodrigo, his son who disappeared in the 80s. He hired detectives, placed newspaper ads, even tried television shows. Rodrigo closed his eyes. Continue. He died of a heart attack, alone in the stable. The widow said he was waiting for someone's return until his last day. And there's something else strange. Go on! He had a special horse, Tempestade. He never wanted to sell it, even when he was in financial difficulties. He said it was for his son when he returned. The horse disappeared the day Manuel died. They never found it. Rodrigo slowly opened his eyes. A black horse that disappeared the day its owner died. A horse with a specific mark on its neck. A horse that appeared to be drowning in the river just as Rodrigo arrived at the ranch. Jonas, cancel everything I have tomorrow. I'm traveling. Where to, boss? Back to the place where I was born. This time, Rodrigo wasn't going as a buyer. He was going as a son who had arrived too late to say goodbye to his father. But perhaps there was still time to save what remained of the inheritance he never knew he had. Perhaps there was still time to meet Tempestade. The trip back to the countryside was different. Rodrigo drove slowly, observing the landscape with new eyes. Every curve of the road, every simple house by the asphalt, every patch of dry land seemed familiar now that he knew the truth. This time, he went directly to the widow's house in town. Donna Carmen Oliveira, 67, opened the door and almost fainted. Her eyes scanned Rodrigo's face with the urgency of someone searching for ghosts. "My God," she murmured, placing a hand on her chest. "Those eyes, they're just like his." "Did you know who I was when I came to buy the ranch?" Carmen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Rodrigo Mendez. I never made the connection. Your father always said Rodrigo de Oliveira, and you were so different, so cold." She invited him inside. The simple house was filled with photos. Manuel in various stages of his life, always with horses. And prominently displayed on the living room wall, a faded photograph, a young Manuel holding an infant child. The child had the same light eyes as Rodrigo. "He never stopped looking for you," Carmen said, serving coffee in mismatched cups. "Even after he married me, even when the detective said it was impossible to find you, he believed you would come back. Why did I leave?" Carmen sighed deeply. "Your birth mother. She had problems. Alcohol, drugs, violent men. Manuel tried to help, but she ran away one night with you. You were 3 years old. We never heard from her again." Rodrigo looked at the photo of the child. "Where did he look for me?" "New Orleans, Chicago, New York. He spent everything he had on detectives. He sold horses, pawned land, everything to pay for the search. He became poor looking for you." The irony cut Rodrigo like a blade. While Manuel ruined himself searching for his son, Rodrigo got rich without knowing he was being sought, and now the prosperous son was buying the father's ruined property. The horse. Rodrigo changed the subject. "Tempestade. What was he like?" Carmen's face lit up. "Oh, Tempestade. He was Manuel's passion, a black thoroughbred, intelligent as a person. Manuel said the horse knew things, understood feelings." She went to a bedroom and returned with a shoebox full of photos. Tempestade at various ages, playful foal, majestic stallion, respected veteran, always with the same mark on his neck. Why the mark? Manuel did that to his special horses. He said it was so they would never get lost, so they would always find their way home. Carmen paused, looking directly at Rodrigo. "Like you. Where is Tempestade now?" Carmen was silent for a long moment. "He disappeared the day Manuel died, March 15th, 2023. Manuel had a heart attack in the stable, taking care of him. When we arrived, Manuel was down and Tempestade had vanished. We never understood how." "And you looked for him?" "For months. Manuel insisted that Tempestade would never be sold. He said when you returned, you needed to find your gift waiting." Rodrigo felt something break inside his chest. "Gift?" Carmen went to a drawer and pulled out a yellowed letter. "Manuel wrote this shortly before he died. He said it was to give to you when you appeared." With trembling hands, Rodrigo opened the letter, the shaky handwriting of a sick man. "My son Rodrigo, if you are reading this, it means you have returned. I always knew you would. A father knows these things. I lost everything looking for you, but I don't regret it. You are worth more than all the land in the world. I took care of Tempestade all these years for you. He was a foal when you disappeared. Now he is a wise horse, as you must be a wise man. I don't know what life you've had, what person you've become, But I know you are my son, and a son always has a place to return to. The ranch is yours. Tempestade is yours. My love is yours. Your father who never stopped loving Manuel." Rodrigo didn't realize when he started crying. Thick tears he hadn't shed since childhood fell onto the letter, smudging the old ink. Carmen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Manuel died happy, you know. In his last days, he would look at the road, saying he felt you were close. The day he died in the morning, he said, 'Today Rodrigo is coming.' And I thought it was delirium from his illness." Rodrigo wiped his eyes, and Tempestade disappeared the same day. It was as if he knew, as if he had gone to look for you. In that moment, Rodrigo understood. The horse he saved from the river, the familiar mark, the look that seemed to know him. Tempestade hadn't disappeared. He had found his way home, and he had brought with him the lost son of his owner. Rodrigo returned to the ranch with his father's letter in his pocket and the weight of 30 years of wasted life on his shoulders. This time, he didn't come to buy. He came to confront what he had become. He spent hours walking the property, seeing clearly what greed had hidden. The stable Manuel built with love was deteriorating. The house where Rodrigo was born had leaks and broken windows. The pasture where he should have learned to ride was overgrown with weeds, all ruined because his father spent his fortune looking for a son who grew up without knowing he was being sought. In the main stable, Rodrigo found more evidence of his father's obsession. A separate stall, larger than the others, with the name Tempestade carved into the wood. Inside, a trough filled with fresh feed. Carmen still came to feed the phantom horse, hoping it would return. And on a back wall, the discovery that destroyed him. Dozens of newspaper clippings pinned with thumbtacks. Missing person ads published over the years. "Looking for my son Rodrigo, missing at 3 years old, last seen in New Orleans, 1981. Manuel looks for Rodrigo de Oliveira. Any information will be rewarded, 1987. Father looks for son, Rodrigo born in 1975, characteristic, light eyes, 1995. Decades of hope printed on cheap paper, and in the middle of the ads, a photo that made Rodrigo collapse, himself at 3 years old, smiling in Manuel's arms, both of them in front of the same stable where he was now crying. Rodrigo called Jonas, his voice choked with emotion. "Cancel the ranch purchase, immediately." "Boss, but the contracts are signed, the investors—" "I told you to cancel," Rodrigo yelled, "and there's more. I want a list of all the families we evicted in the last 5 years, all of them." "Sir, that's going to cause legal problems." "Legal problems are the least of my concerns right now. Do as I'm told." That night, alone in the abandoned ranch, Rodrigo did something he hadn't done in decades. He prayed. He didn't know to whom or why, but he pleaded for a chance to fix the unfixable. As if in response, he heard a familiar whinny. He ran out of the house. In the moonlight, a dark silhouette moved near the pasture. Tempestade was there, free, grazing as if he had never left. Rodrigo approached slowly. The horse raised its head but didn't flee. They looked at each other for a long moment, the broken man and the animal that held his father's memories. "You knew, didn't you?" Rodrigo murmured. "You knew who I was at the river." Tempestade approached and nudged Rodrigo's chest with his muzzle, a simple gesture that carried decades of longing that wasn't his, but now hurt as if it were. Rodrigo hugged the horse's neck and cried as he hadn't since he was 3. He cried for the father he never knew, for the lost opportunities, for the wasted years building a fortune on the suffering of others. "He loved me," Rodrigo said to Tempestade, as if the animal could confirm. "Even without knowing me, even though I was a monster, he loved me." The next morning, Rodrigo made the first difficult decision. He called Dr. Cardoso and instructed that all the purchase documents be burned. The ranch would return to Carmen, debt-free, but that was just the beginning. In the following weeks, Jonas brought the requested list: 47 evicted families, 163 people who lost their homes due to Rodrigo's greed. Each name was a wound, each address a destroyed life. "Jonas, I want you to contact all these families. I'm returning the properties." "Boss, this is financial suicide. You'll lose 80% of your net worth." "I won't lose it." Rodrigo looked out the office window at the photo of Manuel that he now kept on his desk. "I'll recover what truly matters." The first name on the list was the hardest: the Silva family, evicted 6 months ago. The old man who had pleaded for more time to pay off the debt. The man with the 8-year-old granddaughter who didn't understand why she had to leave home. Rodrigo took his car keys. He was going to personally return what he had stolen. Not for redemption, it was too early for that word, but because he finally understood the difference between inheriting a fortune and inheriting a legacy. Manuel had left more than a ranch. He had left an example of how to love unconditionally, and Rodrigo was determined to honor that inheritance, even if it cost him everything he had built on lies. The Silva family's house was in a favela on the outskirts of Caruaru. Rodrigo had never set foot in a place like this. Unfinished masonry houses, unpaved streets, children playing in open sewers. He parked the armored Humvee and immediately drew attention. Curious neighbors approached, some clearly hostile. A rich man didn't show up there without bad intentions. "I'm looking for Sue Antonio Silva," Rodrigo said to a group of teenagers. "Who wants to know?" one of them replied suspiciously. "Someone who needs to settle a score with him." The boys laughed bitterly. "Another bill? The old man doesn't even have a roof over his head." The woman led Rodrigo to a small house where a woman in her mid-40s was washing clothes in the yard. When she saw Rodrigo, her face closed. "If it's about payment, we have nothing. We've already lost everything." "I'm Rodrigo Mendez. I want to speak to Seu Antonio." The woman paled. You're the man who took our farm." Before Rodrigo could respond, a girl of 8 appeared, running. The same one her grandfather had mentioned in his office months before. She stopped when she saw the stranger hiding behind her mother. "Isabella, go play inside," the woman said tensely. "No." Rodrigo knelt to the girl's height. "Hi, Isabella. I met your grandfather. He spoke a lot about you." "Grandpa is sick," the girl replied, still suspicious. "Mommy says it's from sadness because we lost Grandma's house." The sentence was like a punch. Rodrigo swallowed hard. "May I speak to him?" The woman hesitated but nodded. She led Rodrigo into the house, 2 cramped rooms where several people clearly lived. The smell of dampness and reheated food was suffocating. Antonio Silva was lying on a single bed, visibly thinner and older. Seeing Rodrigo, he tried to get up. "No need," Rodrigo said, pulling up a plastic chair. "I came here to talk. If you've come to collect anything else..." "We have nothing," Antonio said, his voice weak. Rodrigo took an envelope from his pocket. "Actually, I came to bring something." Antonio looked suspiciously at the papers Rodrigo extended. They were the deeds to the original ranch, with a new annotation. Transferred back to Antonio Silva and family, free of debts and encumbrances. "I don't understand," the old man murmured, reading and rereading. "Your ranch is coming back to you. I made a mistake, a very big mistake." The woman, who had been listening from the doorway, approached in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "I took your ranch dishonestly. Now I'm giving it back. The land is yours again." Antonio began to cry. Not from joy, he was still processing the information, but from confusion and accumulated despair. "Why now?" he asked. "Why after you destroyed us?" Rodrigo didn't have an easy answer. "Because I discovered who my father was, and he didn't raise me to be the kind of man I became." "Is your father alive?" the woman asked. "He died without knowing me. He spent his life looking for me while I did things like stealing your ranch." The silence was heavy. Isabella slowly approached and touched Rodrigo's arm. "Were you lost and didn't know it?" The childish question was more devastating than any accusation. "Yes, Isabella, I was lost and didn't know it." Antonio sat on the bed with difficulty. "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing. I want nothing." "Everyone wants something." Rodrigo looked around the miserable house where he had forced that family to live. "I want you to go back home. I want Isabella to play in the yard where her grandmother played. I want to try to fix some of the damage I did." Antonio studied Rodrigo's face for a long moment. "Are you sick? Dying?" "No, I'm trying to learn how to live." At that moment, Rodrigo's phone rang. It was Jonas in a panic. "Boss, the partners are furious. They found out you cancelled the purchases and are threatening to break all contracts. You'll lose over 200 million this week alone." Rodrigo looked at Isabella, who was playing with her doll on the concrete floor. He looked at Antonio, who was still holding the deeds as if they were a mirage. He looked at the woman, who was crying softly at the door. "Jonas, let them break them. I have more important things to do." He hung up the phone and turned his attention back to the Silva family. "When do you want to go back to the ranch?" "Tomorrow," Isabella answered before the adults. "Grandpa, can we go home tomorrow?" Antonio nodded, still in disbelief. "We can, my little granddaughter. We can go home." Rodrigo smiled for the first time in months. It cost 200 million, but it was worth every cent. 6 months later, Rodrigo had returned 32 of the 47 stolen properties. Each return cost a fortune. Each forgiven family was a blow to the gut of his former partners. His company was in tatters. His reputation in the corporate world was destroyed, and his bank account had shrunk from 800 million to 120 million. He had never felt richer. Rodrigo now lived in a simple house near Hope Ranch, which he had completely renovated. Manuel's stable had been lovingly restored, and Tempestade had his favorite stall back. The horse, at 17 years old, moved slower, but his eyes still shone with the intelligence Manuel always highlighted. That morning, Rodrigo received an unexpected visitor. Mariana Santos, 34, knocked on the door with a folder of documents in her hand. Rodrigo knew her. She was one of the lawyers he had hired to mediate the property returns. "Mr. Rodrigo, we have a problem." "What is it now?" "The Mendonça family. Do you remember? They were evicted 3 years ago from the ranch in Petrolina." Rodrigo remembered. José Mendonça, his pregnant wife, 2 young children, one of the worst foreclosures he had ordered. "They don't want the ranch back," Mariana continued. "What do you mean they don't want it?" "José died in a construction accident last year. He was working on a dangerous site because he needed the money. The widow says she wants nothing from you." The news hit Rodrigo like a hammer. José had died because of him. If he hadn't lost the ranch, he wouldn't have been working on a dangerous construction site. "And the children?" "They live in a squatter camp. The oldest, 12 years old, dropped out of school to take care of the younger ones, while their mother works as a domestic." Rodrigo closed his eyes. "Take her there. I want to speak to the widow personally." "Sir, she was very clear. She doesn't want to see you." "Then I'll go without an appointment." The squatter camp was under a viaduct in Petrolina. Shacks made of plywood and tarpaulin, sewage running between the houses, children playing in the open garbage. Rodrigo found the Mendonça family in a shack smaller than a hotel room, Conceição. Mendonça, 29, was hanging laundry on an improvised clothesline when she saw Rodrigo. Her face immediately closed. "What do you want here?" "I want to return your ranch." I don't want anything from you. You killed my husband. The accusation was just. Rodrigo didn't try to defend himself. You're right, I did. And I can't bring him back. But I can give your children a better life. With the dirty money you earn by stealing from people like us? With the money I'll use to fix what I broke. Conceição laughed bitterly. You think money fixes death, you bastard? No, but it can prevent more people from dying. At that moment, Conceição's oldest daughter appeared. Ana, 12 years old, carrying a baby, had dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. Mum, João is out of milk, the girl said, ignoring Rodrigo. We don't have money, daughter. You'll have to wait until tomorrow. I can buy milk, Rodrigo offered. We don't need your charity, Conceição retorted. But Ana looked at Rodrigo with interest. Are you really rich? Ana, her mother reprimanded. I was, Ana. Now I'm just a man trying to fix mistakes. Did my father die because of you? The child's direct question broke Rodrigo's defenses. Yes, Ana, because of something very bad I did. And now you want to help because you have a guilty conscience? The girl's precocious maturity was painful. I want to help because it's the right thing to do, and because your father didn't deserve to die. Conceição approached, her eyes full of contained tears. Do you have children, Rodrigo? No. Then you don't know what it's like to see your child go hungry because you don't have money for food. You don't know what it's like for a 12-year-old to become a mother to her siblings because you can't afford daycare. Every word was a blade. You're right, I don't. But I want to learn. You want to learn? Conceição laughed humorlessly. Then stay. Stay here for a week, sleep on the floor, eat breakfast with water and sugar, watch your children cry from hunger. Then you'll learn. Rodrigo didn't hesitate. I accept. How? I'll stay for a week, live as you live, and then if you let me, I'll set up a foundation for families like yours, not charity, opportunity. Conceição was silent. Ana rocked the baby, who began to cry. And if at the end of the week I still think you're a son of a bitch, then you'll be right, and I'll leave. Conceição looked at her children, at the shack she called home, at the life she had never chosen. 1 week, but no special treatment, no cell phone, no driver, no special food. Live like a poor person. I accept. Nana smiled for the first time. It'll be interesting to see a rich man go hungry. Rodrigo spent the 7 hardest days of his life learning what his wealth had cost. And he discovered that fixing the past required more than money. It required humility to accept that some wounds would never fully heal. A 1.5 years had passed since Rodrigo discovered the truth about his father. The Manuel de Oliveira Foundation was already operating in 3 cities, offering rural microcredit, vocational training, and free veterinary assistance to small breeders. Rodrigo was in the foundation's office, a simple house in the center of Petrolina, when he received a call that changed everything. Mr. Rodrigo, it's Dr. Cardoso. I need to speak with you urgently about Tempestade. The veterinarian had called from Hope Ranch. Tempestade, now 19 years old, was having health problems. Rodrigo dropped everything and drove the 3 hours there in 2. He found Dr. Roberto Silva, the veterinarian, examining the horse. The diagnosis wasn't good. It's his age, Rodrigo. Heart problems, worn joints. He's suffering. Rodrigo stroked Tempestade's neck. The horse leaned its head against him, as it had for months. It was a ritual between them. Morning and night, Rodrigo would come to talk to the animal that had been the bridge to his father. How much time does he have? Hard to say. A few months, maybe. We can medicate him to reduce the pain, but he won't get better. No. That night, Rodrigo slept in the stable, close to Tempestade's stall. He couldn't accept losing his last physical connection to Manuel. The horse had become more than an animal. It was a silent confidant, a living witness to the paternal love that had arrived too late. The next morning, Ana Mendonça arrived at the ranch. Now 14, she'd become one of the foundation's first scholarship recipients, studying veterinary medicine through a special program. Conceição had reconciled with Rodrigo after the week he spent in the shack and was now a regional coordinator for the foundation. "How is he?" Anna asked, watching Tempestade. "Tired, old, like I should be." "You're not old, you just took a long time to grow up." The teenager's wisdom always surprised Rodrigo. Ina had a direct way of seeing the world that made him see painful truths. "Anna, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you forgiven me? Truly?" Anna was silent for a moment, stroking Tempestade. "Forgiving is weird, right? It's not like flipping a switch and it's done. It's like accepting that you were bad but chose to be different." "And do you think I really chose?" "I think you didn't have a choice. After you knew the truth, you couldn't keep being the same." That afternoon, Rodrigo found something in Tempestade's stall he hadn't seen before. Under a loose board, a small bundle wrapped in plastic. Inside, a letter from Manuel and a photo. The letter was more recent, dated March 2023, a week before his death. "Rodrigo, if you found this, it means Tempestade brought you here. I knew he would. I'm sick. I won't last much longer, but I'm not sad. I found out you are alive and successful. A detective told me you are a wealthy businessman in Chicago. I was proud. It doesn't matter what kind of man you've become. You are my son, and a son always has a place to return to. When Tempestade gets too old, don't let him suffer. He deserves to depart in peace with dignity, as we all deserve. Love him as I loved you, unconditionally. Your father forever, Manuel P.S. In the photo, you are 3 years old and riding Tempestade for the first time. He was still young. You both grew up without knowing you needed each other." The photo showed a small boy smiling on the back of a black colt. Rodrigo remembered that moment. Not clearly, but as a warm, secure feeling. Tempestade had been his first friend. Dr. Roberto returned at the end of the week with results from new tests. Tempestade's heart was failing. It would be a matter of days. "Is there anything I can do so he doesn't suffer?" Rodrigo asked. "I can administer a sedative. He'll fall asleep and not wake up. It's the most dignified way." Rodrigo looked at Tempestade, who was grazing peacefully in the paddock. The horse had fulfilled its mission. It had brought the lost son back home. Now it deserved to rest. "Anna, do you want to say goodbye to him?" The girl approached and whispered something in Tempestade's ear. The horse whinnied softly, as if understanding. "What did you say?" "And the thank you for taking care of him until I arrived." On Friday afternoon, Tempestade fell asleep forever in Rodrigo's arms, surrounded by all the people who had learned to love him through the late kindness he had awakened. He was buried next to the stall where he was born, with Manuel's horseshoe marking the grave. Rodrigo didn't cry. He knew Tempestade had completed his journey, and his was just beginning. 3 years after Tempestade's death, Rodrigo was celebrating his 62nd birthday in a way he had never imagined, surrounded by over 200 people at Hope Ranch, which had become the center of the Manuel de Oliveira Foundation. The property now housed a rural school, a vocational training center, a veterinary clinic, and a sanctuary for abandoned elderly horses. Rodrigo had transformed his inheritance of pain into a legacy of hope. Ana Mendonça, now 17 and about to enter veterinary school on a full scholarship, had organized the party. Conceição coordinated the community kitchen that fed 50 families a day. Antonio Silva, recovered and back on his farm, brought his guitar to play the songs Manuel liked. "Say something, Rodrigo," Ana asked, pushing him toward the makeshift stage set up in the main courtyard. Rodrigo looked at the faces around him, families who had lost everything and now had a new chance. Children who didn't know hunger, young people who studied instead of working dangerous jobs, elderly people who had shelter and medical care. "I'm not good with pretty words," he began. His voice choked. I spent 60 years of my life talking only about numbers, profits, contracts. I never learned to talk about important things. Then learn now, someone from the audience shouted, drawing laughter. 3 years ago, I was the richest man in this region, and also the poorest. Rich in money, poor in everything that truly matters. Today I am the opposite. I have little money and much wealth. Rodrigo pointed to Tempestade's grave, marked by a simple cross surrounded by fresh flowers. That horse over there taught me something no university teaches, that love has no expiration date. My father died loving me, even though I was a terrible son. Tempestade brought me back home, even though I didn't know I was lost. His voice grew stronger. You people here, many of you had every right to hate me. I stole land, destroyed families, caused deaths. I won't pretend that didn't happen. I won't ask for forgiveness because I know some things are unforgivable. The silence was absolute. Even the children had stopped playing. But you gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. Not because I asked for it, but because you are better than me. And that taught me that life isn't about deserving chances. It's about what we do with the chances we receive. Rodrigo took a faded photo from his pocket, himself at 3 years old with Tempestade. This photo stayed in a stable for 30 years, waiting for me to return, like my father's love, like your patience, like the kindness I thought didn't exist in the world. His voice broke a little. Today, looking at you all, I see that kindness exists, and that it's never too late to choose to be better. Anna approached and took his hand. Tell them about the new project. Rodrigo smiled. Oh yes, Anna here convinced me that the foundation needs to grow. We're opening 2 new centers, one in Alabama and another in Florida, and there's something special. He paused dramatically. Each center will have a horse, not for work, for therapy, to teach children who have suffered abandonment that it's possible to trust again. The audience erupted in applause. Rodrigo raised his hand, asking for silence. But there's a condition. Each horse will have the horseshoe mark on its neck, the same one Tempestade had, so we never forget that everyone deserves a place to return to. Nding Conciso approached the stage. Rodrigo, may I say something? Of course. My husband, Jose, he died because of you. That's a fact. But these 200 people here have had their lives saved because of you too. That's also a fact. She wiped her eyes. You can't erase the harm you've done, but you can make good outweigh evil. And you've done that. Rodrigo stepped off the stage and walked to Tempestade's grave. The party continued around him, but he needed a moment alone with the friend who had brought him back home. Thank you, old friend, he murmured, touching the simple cross. You completed the mission. You brought your owner's son back, and you taught me that family isn't just blood, it's choice. A gentle breeze rustled the flowers on the grave. For a second, Rodrigo swore he heard a distant whinny, but perhaps it was just the wind, or perhaps it was Tempestade, approving of the man he had become. Rodrigo returned to the party, where Anna was waiting for him with a piece of cake. Did you make your wish, birthday boy? I did. What did you wish for? Rodrigo looked around, at the happy families, at the transformed property, at the legacy his father would be proud to see. I wish to have enough time to keep fixing what I broke, and that when my time comes, I won't die alone as I thought I would. Anna smiled. That wish has already come true, Rodrigo. You have a family now, a chosen family. And for the first time in 62 years, Rodrigo Mendes de Oliveira felt truly at home.